I was sitting in Karen's living room, completely at ease. A cold beer resting in my hand, laughing at something Spencer said about the neighbor's overgrown hedges. The kind of afternoon that feels too ordinary to remember. No tension, no edge, no reason to watch the clock or the ceiling or the staircase. Just two men, cold drinks, and a quiet house. Then it happened. A scream tore straight through the walls. High, sharp, and unmistakably my son's voice. My body moved before my mind could catch up. The beer slipped from my hand onto the cushion. My feet hit the floor, and then came the thud. Not a stumble, not a fall from a chair. Something heavier, something final, something that shook the walls like the house itself flinched. I yanked the front door open and froze. Dylan was lying on the concrete below the balcony, completely still, and I felt something inside me crack that has never fully healed since. Welcome to Prodigy Tales. What you're about to hear is the story of how one woman's calculated cruelty destroyed her own life, and how justice, when it finally came completely. Karen had been ruling this neighborhood long before I moved in. Not through kindness or competence, but through the kind of small power that small people cling to the hardest. She fined residents for trash bins left out 8 minutes past collection. She called emergency board meetings over grass height measured to the half-inch. She filed formal complaints about wind chimes. Wind chimes. She treated a residential community like a kingdom she personally inherited. And for years, no one pushed back hard enough to matter. I decided to look closer. What I found wasn't just pettiness. It was theft disguised as paperwork. HOA funds quietly redirected toward overpriced personal purchases, vanity renovations that benefited only her property, and expenses so strange they would have been funny if they weren't paid with our money. I spent weeks documenting everything. Receipts, bank statements, side-by-side comparisons of what was approved versus what was actually spent. I walked into that HOA meeting with a folder so airtight it left no room for doubt. Karen's expression shifted the moment I opened it. By the time I finished presenting, the board had gone completely silent. Her face moved through denial, calculation, and then something I had never seen on her before. Shame. They suspended her that very evening. I expected screaming. I expected threats slipped under my door at midnight or a flood of passive-aggressive complaints targeting every inch of my property. What I got instead was silence. Complete, unbroken, unsettling silence. That silence should have been a 5-alarm warning. Instead, I took it as a win. That was my first mistake. 3 days after the suspension, Karen knocked on my door. I opened it expecting coldness, maybe a veiled threat hidden inside a polite sentence. What I found instead stopped me cold. She was smiling. Not the tight, rehearsed smile she wore at board meetings, but something softer, almost believable. She thanked me, said the suspension had been exactly what she needed, that she had been carrying too much, controlling too much, and that exposing her was, and I remember this word exactly, a gift. I stood there in my own doorway, genuinely unsure if I was being played. This was the same woman who once filed a formal complaint because my welcome mat was a 1/4 inch outside the approved boundary. Now she stood here talking about personal growth, like she had just come back from a wellness retreat. My instincts didn't relax. They sharpened, because there is a certain kind of danger that only arrives wearing a warm expression. Then she brought up the boys. Terry and Dylan had been close long before any of this began, and she said it wasn't right for adult issues to spill into their world. She proposed a playdate. Simple, harmless, reasonable. It all made perfect sense on the surface, which is exactly why it didn't sit right with me. I agreed, but added one condition without hesitation. I would be there. For a brief second, something flickered in her expression. A blink that came just a bit too fast, a smile that returned a little too carefully. She said Friday would be ideal and left without another word. That night, I stayed awake, listening to the silence in my house, replaying the conversation again and again in my head. I told myself I was overthinking, that people can change, that not everything is a trap. I almost convinced myself. Friday came the way dangerous days often do. Quiet, ordinary, wrapped in normal light. I drove Dylan to Karen's house, trying to believe the uneasiness was just habit. Spencer opened the door, looking genuinely at ease, the kind of calm that comes after finally letting go of years of tension. He welcomed us warmly, and I noticed right away how different the house felt. Sunlight poured through spotless windows. Something warm was baking in the back. Toys were scattered across the living room floor the way they are in homes where children are truly happy. Dylan slipped off his shoes at the door, called Terry's name up the stairs, and disappeared before I could say a word. Just like that, my son was upstairs, laughing, safe in the effortless way only children can feel. Completely, and without doubt. Spencer handed me a cold beer, and we settled into conversation the way men do when nothing urgent needs solving. Sports, the neighborhood, a barbecue he was planning for next weekend. I felt relaxed, present, genuinely at ease for the first time in weeks. A few minutes later, Karen appeared at the edge of the room. She smiled briefly, said she was going to check on the boys, and headed toward the stairs without waiting for a reply. I nodded and turned back to Spencer. I didn't watch her go up. I didn't follow the sound of her steps. I had no reason to. That's the detail that never stops haunting me. The scream came out of nowhere. High, terrified, and unmistakably Dylan. My body was already moving before the sound fully reached me. Spencer's beer hit the floor. I was at the front door before I even knew why. Then came the impact, not just a noise but a force. Something that traveled through the walls, the floor, and into my feet all at once. I flung the door open, and the world outside stopped making sense. Dylan was lying on the porch concrete below the balcony. His small body bent in a way bodies should never bend. Blood spread beneath his head slowly and darkly, the kind of sight that stays with you forever no matter how hard you try to forget. His chest rose faintly in shallow, uncertain breaths. His mouth hung open like he was reaching for air that never quite came. I dropped to my knees. My hands found him, but didn't know what to do. They trembled uncontrollably. I was afraid to hold him, and even more afraid to let go. I called his name. Then I pleaded. The kind of pleading that goes beyond words and becomes something raw, something deeper than language. Above me, Karen appeared at the balcony railing. Her voice drifted down with a calm that still chills me to this day. He jumped, she said. I swear he jumped. Spencer was already on the phone when everything started unfolding. The paramedics arrived quickly and moved with that controlled silence of people trained to handle the worst moments in other people's lives. Oxygen mask, pulse check, tight clipped exchanges between them that I could hear but couldn't fully register. They worked on him with careful precision, lifted him onto the stretcher, and told me they would do everything they could. But their eyes were saying something more honest and far more terrifying than their words. I stayed by the railing long after the ambulance vanished, hands locked around the wood, unable to move, unable to think, stuck in the exact spot where my son had been breathing only moments before. The police pulled everyone apart before the ambulance even disappeared around the corner. Spencer stood in the grass looking pale, hollow, like he was trapped between two realities at once. Karen was behind the patrol car, composed and controlled, already shaping the version of events she planned to give. She told the officers she barely saw anything, that it all happened too fast, that she couldn't explain it. She repeated the word tragic again and again, but it sounded empty each time, like something rehearsed rather than felt. Then Terry stepped forward. Karen's own son, just 11 years old, face wet with tears, voice shaking but still clear enough to cut through everything. He told the officers exactly what he saw. No hesitation, no softening. Standing in his own driveway, he described with painful precision how his mother called Dylan onto the balcony, grabbed his wrist, pulled him toward the railing, and pushed him over with a deliberate force that left no room for accident. The officers asked Spencer if they could check the footage from Terry's bedroom camera. He just nodded without a word. Within minutes, everything Terry said was confirmed. The video showed Karen walking calmly across the balcony, taking Dylan's wrist, pulling him forward, and then pushing him over. No panic, no rage, just a steady, deliberate motion that made the entire scene go silent. There was nothing left to debate. Karen was handcuffed without resistance, without theatrics, without a single word. She stared ahead as they led her away, and for the first time, she had nothing left to say. The court delivered its decision with quiet finality. 22 years in state prison for attempted murder and child endangerment. Hundreds of thousands in restitution and damages. Her home ordered sold. Her accounts drained. Everything stripped away that she had ever used to control or intimidate others. The HOA power she once weaponized was gone. Her reputation dismantled, her influence erased in a single morning by her own child's testimony and a camera she never thought to check. There was a certain kind of justice in it, not loud or dramatic, but final, closing like a door that never opens again. Dylan survived, not instantly and not without struggle, but he came back piece by piece. First a small squeeze of my hand, then careful broken words, then steadier days that slowly felt like life again instead of aftermath. I'll never treat ordinary moments lightly again. Not quiet afternoons, not my son's laughter in another room, not anything small or simple. Karen spent years making people feel powerless inside their own homes, and in the end she lost hers completely. If this story reached you, drop your city in the comments below, like and subscribe for more. We're only just getting started.